Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive with us here on the Book Summary Podcast. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss out on future deep dives. We've got an awesome one for you today. We're going to be exploring Finish What You Start by Peter Hollins.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one.
I know, right? I feel like this is something we can all relate to. We've all got those projects or dreams we've started with a ton of energy only to see them fizzle out. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I've got a whole closet full of them.
Me too. So this book is basically a guide to help us bridge that gap between, our intentions and actually taking action. It's about breaking free from that cycle of starting things and never finishing them. Like imagine what it would feel like to finally finish that novel you've been thinking about writing or finally launch that business idea you've been playing around with.
Yeah, or actually learn how to play the guitar.
Yes, exactly. And to help us unpack all the wisdom in Finish What You Start, I've got an expert here with me today. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to dive into this with you. So what was it about this book that really spoke to you?
You know what really struck me about Finish What You Start? It's that it doesn't just offer a bunch of quick fixes or try to pump you up with motivation. It actually goes deep into the psychology of why we do what we do.
Okay, so it's like more than just a self-help book.
Yeah, totally. It explores the real reasons why we struggle to finish what we start and then gives you actual strategies based on science and research to help you overcome those obstacles.
I like that. So it's not just like believe in yourself and you can do it. It's actually giving you the tools.
Exactly.
One thing that I found really relatable right away was the other story about building a wooden canoe. He starts this whole project with all this excitement, right?
Yeah.
But then, life gets in the way, he gets distracted, and the canoe just sits in his garage for years, unfinished.
Yeah, that's such a classic story. I think most people have a version of that in their own lives.
Totally. We start with good intentions, but then we hit a roadblock or lose motivation, and the project just fades away.
It's like a universal experience.
It is. And the book really gets into the reasons why that happens. And it's not just about willpower. It's about understanding, like you said, the psychology behind it.
Exactly. It's way more complex than just being lazy.
So I'm curious, what does the book actually mean by following through? It seems like it's more than just checking things off a to-do list, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's about fully committing to a goal and then taking consistent action to achieve it, even when it gets hard.
It's about the long game.
Definitely. And the book breaks this whole process down into 4 main elements: focus, self-discipline, action, and persistence.
Okay, so those are the 4 key ingredients: focus, self-discipline, action, and persistence. It sounds simple enough.
It does, right?
But why is it so hard to actually put these into practice?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the book actually identifies 2 main categories of reasons why we don't follow through. The first one is inhibiting tactics. These are things we do, sometimes without even realizing it, that totally sabotage our efforts.
Inhibiting tactics, that sounds sneaky. Like we're getting in our own way without even knowing it.
Exactly, like setting bad goals.
Okay, so how do we set bad goals?
We set these vague goals, like be healthier or learn a new language, but those are too broad. There's no clear action steps. The book really pushes the idea of setting SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
That makes so much sense. It's like trying to shoot an arrow without aiming.
Right, you gotta have a target.
I know, I've definitely set those vague goals before. It's no wonder I never achieve them.
And then there's procrastination.
Oh yeah, procrastination. We've all been there.
Big time. But the book actually goes into the psychology behind it and offers some strategies for overcoming it.
Okay, because I need those strategies. What does it say?
Well, one key insight is that procrastination is usually driven by fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of the unknown. So it's about figuring out what you're afraid of and then coming up with strategies to deal with that fear.
That's interesting. So it's not just about being lazy. It's about understanding those deeper emotions.
Exactly.
Okay, before we dive into the procrastination strategies, are there any other inhibiting tactics we should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, there's this thing called productive procrastination.
Productive procrastination. What does that even mean?
It's when we trick ourselves into thinking we're being productive, but we're really just avoiding the actual work.
Ooh, I've definitely done that. Like spending hours organizing my desk instead of actually writing that report.
Exactly. Or like endlessly researching something instead of starting the project. We tell ourselves we're being productive, but we're really just procrastinating.
It's like we're getting ready to get ready, but never actually doing the thing.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's distractions.
Oh man, don't even get me started on distractions.
Especially in this digital age, we're constantly bombarded with notifications, emails, social media. It's like a never-ending stream of distractions.
It's like our brains are being pulled in a million directions at once.
Exactly. And the book talks about how important it is to create a no distraction zone where you can actually focus and get work done.
That sounds amazing. I
Huh?
desperately need a no distraction zone in my life. Okay, so we've talked about inhibiting tactics, the things we do that sabotage us. But what about the psychological roadblocks you mentioned? What are those all about?
Yeah, psychological roadblocks are like deeper beliefs and patterns that hold us back. Often we're not even aware of them.
Okay, so these are the things that are going on beneath the surface, kind of running the show without us knowing it.
Exactly. And one of the biggest roadblocks is the fear of judgment. We're so worried about what other people will think or that we'll make a mistake that we don't even try.
Oh, that fear of judgment is real. It can be so paralyzing.
It really can. And the book also talks about the trap of perfectionism. We think it's a good thing, but it can actually be a major obstacle to getting things done.
Wait, perfectionism is a bad thing. I always thought it was a positive trait.
It can be in some ways,
Hmm.
but when it comes to follow through, it can keep us stuck in this cycle of overthinking and overplanning, and we end up never actually finishing anything.
That makes sense. It's like we're so focused on getting it perfect that we're afraid to even start.
Exactly. And then finally, there's self-awareness. It's about understanding your own strengths, weaknesses, and what motivates you.
Self-awareness seems like such a key ingredient in all of this. Like if you don't know yourself, how can you know what works for you?
Exactly. You have to understand your own patterns and tendencies to figure out how to overcome them.
Wow, this is already so insightful. I'm starting to see some of these inhibiting tactics and psychological roadblocks in my own life. But don't worry, everyone. We're not going to leave you hanging with all these obstacles.
Right, we've got solutions.
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore the book's strategies for overcoming these challenges and actually start finishing what we start. But before we go, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the Book Summary Podcast for more in-depth explorations of incredible books.
All right, so we're back and ready to dive into the practical stuff.
Yes. Give me those strategies. Last time we were talking about all those pesky psychological roadblocks that trip us up.
Totally, like fear of judgment, perfectionism, and even lack of self-awareness, right?
Yeah, all the fun stuff. But now let's talk about what we can actually DO to start finishing those projects.
Okay, so the book offers a ton of practical tips, but one of the first things it tackles is motivation.
Okay, motivation. We all need that.
Right, but it's not just about finding that initial spark, it's about keeping it going.
Yeah, we've all had that burst of enthusiasm when we start something new, but then it fizzles out.
It's so common. So the book talks about staying hungry, like keeping that motivation alive.
Staying hungry. I like that. But how do we actually DO that?
Well, the book emphasizes balancing internal and external motivators.
Okay, so there are two types of motivation.
Yeah. External motivators are things like rewards, deadlines, or having an accountability partner.
So like having someone to answer to.
Exactly. It gives you that extra push to stay on track.
Yeah, no, I'm more likely to do something if I know someone's going to check up on me.
For sure. The book even talks about putting money down for a class or program.
Oh yeah, that'll get you motivated.
Right. If you've got skin in the game, you're more likely to show up.
Totally. What about those internal motivators?
So internal motivators are more about your values, your passions, that desire for growth. It's about connecting with what really matters to you.
So it's about finding your WHY.
Exactly. The book really encourages you to dig deep and figure out what drives you. Like, why is this goal important? How will it make you feel when you achieve it?
Yeah, I think it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and lose sight of the bigger picture.
It happens to all of us.
Uh,
Another thing the book talks about is opportunity cost.
Opportunity cost. Isn't that an economics term?
It is, but it applies to our personal lives, too. Every choice we make means we're saying no to something else.
So it's about realizing that our time and energy are limited?
Exactly. And the book encourages us to ask ourselves, is this goal worth the sacrifice? What am I giving up to pursue it?
Yeah, that's a good question to ask yourself. It helps you prioritize.
Right. And speaking of prioritizing, the book also stresses the importance of keeping your motivation top of mind. like using visual reminders, vision boards, or even just sticky notes with inspiring quotes.
Oh, I love that idea. Little reminders to keep you going.
Right. Whatever works for you. So we've talked about staying hungry, but what about actually getting started?
Yeah, that's the hardest part sometimes. It's like there's this invisible barrier between thinking about doing something and actually doing it.
I know, right? The book acknowledges that starting can be the toughest part. It goes into all sorts of strategies for beating procrastination.
Okay, hit me with those strategies.
So one interesting one is temptation bundling. Have you ever heard of that?
Temptation bundling. It sounds kind of fun, but maybe dangerous too.
It's actually a pretty clever trick. It's about pairing something you really enjoy with a task you've been putting off.
Like what?
Okay, so let's say you love listening to podcasts, but you hate doing laundry. With temptation bundling, you only allow yourself to listen to those podcasts while you're folding clothes.
That's brilliant. You're turning a chore into something enjoyable.
Right, and the author actually talks about doing this with his wooden canoe project. He only let himself listen to his favorite music while he was working on it.
That's such a great example. I actually do something like that. I only let myself watch my favorite trashy reality show while I'm on the treadmill.
You see, it works. It makes the whole thing a lot more bearable.
It totally does. Okay, so temptation bundling is one strategy. What else?
Another one is breaking down tasks into smaller chunks, so it doesn't feel so overwhelming.
Yeah, I think that's key. When you look at the whole project, it can be really intimidating. But if you break it down into smaller steps, it feels more manageable.
Exactly. And the book says to start with the easiest task first. It helps you build momentum.
I like that. It's like celebrating those little victories along the way.
Exactly. And sometimes a little bit of fear can be motivating too.
Wait, fear. I thought we were trying to overcome fear.
We are, but there's this idea of productive paranoia.
Productive paranoia. I've never heard of that.
It's about using a healthy dose of fear to push you into action.
Okay, like how?
Visualize the negative consequences of procrastination, like missing a deadline or disappointing someone. It can be a good kick in the pants.
I've definitely used that one before. Sometimes the fear of letting someone down is enough to get me moving.
Exactly. But it shouldn't be your only motivator. Chronic stress isn't good for anyone.
Right. It's about finding that balance. Okay, so we've got temptation bundling, breaking tasks down, and a sprinkle of productive paranoia. What about creating an environment that supports focus?
Good question. The book has a whole chapter on creating a no distraction zone.
A no distraction zone. I need that in my life.
We all do, and it starts with minimizing distraction.
Okay, so like putting your phone away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And clearing clutter from your workspace, turning off notifications, closing extra tabs on your computer.
I know I'm way more productive when my space is clean and organized.
Yeah.
It's like it clears out the mental clutter too.
Totally. But even with all that, distractions can still creep in, right?
Oh yeah, it's like they have a mind of their own.
So the book also talks about creating default actions.
Default actions, what are those?
It's about designing your environment so the desired action is the easiest one. Like if you want to drink more water, make sure you always have a pitcher of cold water right there on the counter.
I see. Make it the easy choice. I actually do that with snacks. I keep a bowl of fruit on the counter, so I'm more likely to grab that instead of chips.
Exactly. It's about setting yourself up for success.
I love that. It's like making healthy choices the path of least resistance.
Right. And you can do that with all sorts of things. Want to read more? Keep a book on your bedside table. Want to exercise? Leave your workout clothes out the night before.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, what about multitasking? I feel like I'm constantly trying to do a million things at once.
Well, the book actually says that multitasking is a myth.
A myth? But everyone does it.
I know, right? But it turns out that it actually makes us less productive
Really? Why is that?
because of something called attention residue.
Attention residue. That sounds kind of gross.
It's the idea that when we switch between tasks, our brains don't fully disengage from the previous task. So we're carrying around this mental baggage that slows us down.
Ooh, that makes sense. I always feel scattered when I try to do too many things at once.
Exactly. So the book recommends single tasking, focusing on one task at a time until it's done.
Okay, so single tasking instead of multitasking. What else?
There's also a technique called batching. It's about grouping similar tasks together and doing them in blocks of time.
Oh, like setting aside a specific time for checking emails instead of doing it all day long.
Exactly. It helps you get into a flow state and be more efficient.
Okay, batching. I like that.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not just about knowing what to do, it's about knowing what not to do.
You're right. The book actually suggests creating a don't do list.
A don't do list. That's interesting.
It's about identifying those activities that are just wasting your time and energy, like mindless scrolling on social media or watching TV when you should be working.
Ooh, I need to make one of those lists. I can think of a few things to put on it already.
I bet we all can. Okay, there's also this rule called the 40-70 rule. Have you ever felt like you need all the information before you can start a project?
Oh my gosh, yes. I get stuck in analysis paralysis all the time. It's like I need to research every single thing before I can make a decision.
That's exactly what this rule addresses. It was actually coined by Colin Powell, the former Secretary of State.
Wow, impressive. What does it say?
He says you only need between 40% and 70% of the information you need before you take action.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between being informed and being overwhelmed.
Exactly. It's about being okay with not knowing everything and trusting that you'll figure it out as you go.
That's so freeing. And it also helps combat that perfectionism trap.
Right. And finally, believe it or not, the book actually encourages us to embrace the power of doing nothing.
Wait, what? Doing nothing? I thought this book was all about getting things done.
It is, but it also stresses the importance of rest and recovery.
Okay, so it's about finding that balance between work and rest.
Exactly. We need time to recharge our batteries, both physically and mentally.
That's such a good reminder.
Yeah,
It's easy to get caught up in that always-on mentality.
I know, right? But the book reminds us that rest is just as important as work.
This has been so helpful. I'm feeling really motivated to start putting some of these strategies into practice.
I'm glad to hear that.
Welcome back, everyone. We are ready for the final part of our deep dive into finish what you start.
I'm excited to wrap things up. We've covered a lot of ground.
I know, right? So many great strategies. But even with all this new knowledge, I feel like there are still ways we can trip ourselves up. You know, those little things that sabotage our efforts.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Even with the best intentions, there are still pitfalls we need to be aware of. That's actually what the book tackles next. It has a whole section on deadly pitfalls.
Ooh, deadly pitfalls. That sounds ominous. What are we talking about here?
These are like habits or mindsets that can really sabotage our progress, even when we're trying our best.
Okay, so it's like we're setting ourselves up to fail without even realizing it.
Exactly. And the first one is false hope syndrome.
False hope syndrome. What is that?
It's all about setting unrealistic expectations. We get all excited, set these huge goals, and then crash and burn when we don't see results immediately.
Oh, I've been there. Like those New Year's resolutions that fizzle out by February.
Totally. The book emphasizes that real change takes time and effort. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, you know?
Yeah, we need to be patient with ourselves.
Right, and celebrate those small wins along the way. Don't get discouraged if you don't see massive changes overnight.
Okay, false hope syndrome. Noted. What's next?
Next up is overthinking.
Overthinking. That's my middle name.
Mine too. It's so easy to get stuck in our heads analyzing every detail and planning for every possible scenario.
And then we never actually get anything done.
Exactly. The book reminds us that at some point, you got to stop thinking and start doing.
Easier said than done sometimes, right?
It is, but it's about finding that balance between planning and action.
Okay, overthinking check.
Yeah.
What else should we watch out for?
Worrying. Worry is a big one.
Oh, tell me about it. I can worry about anything.
It's so easy to get caught up in what ifs and worst case scenarios, but it just drains our energy.
And it doesn't solve anything, right?
Nope. The book encourages us to focus on what we can control. Take action instead of dwelling on anxieties.
Yeah, be proactive instead of reactive.
Exactly. And the final pitfall is failing to know yourself.
Failing to know thyself. That sounds deep.
It's about understanding your own strengths, weaknesses, and preferences. What works for one person might not work for another.
So it's about figuring out your own personal productivity style.
Exactly. Experiment with different approaches. Pay attention to your energy levels when you're most focused, and build a system that supports you.
So it's not about following someone else's recipe for success, it's about creating your own.
Exactly. Now that we've covered those pitfalls, let's talk about the solutions. The book's final chapter is all about creating systems for success. It starts with keeping a scoreboard.
A scoreboard, like in a game.
Yeah, the idea is to track your progress and celebrate those little wins.
Oh, I like that. It's like gamifying your goals.
Right. It can make the whole process more fun and motivating. And it taps into our natural competitiveness.
Totally. What's the next system?
Next up is time management. This is a crucial one.
Ooh, time management. The eternal struggle.
I know, right? But the book gives some great tips. Creating routines, minimizing distractions, being realistic about how much time things actually take. You know,
It's about planning your day and being intentional with your time.
exactly. And then there's this idea of lowering your transaction costs.
Transaction costs. I thought that was a business term.
It is, but it applies here too. It's about making it easier to do the things you want to do.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Like, if you want to eat healthy, don't keep junk food in your house. If you want to exercise, lay out your workout clothes the night before.
Ah, I see. You're removing those barriers and temptation.
Exactly. And finally, the book recommends gathering all information first. So before you jump into a project, make sure you have everything you need. All the resources, information, materials.
Oh, that makes so much sense. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the middle of something and had to stop to find something. It totally breaks your flow.
Right. So get everything ready up front so you can stay focused and in the zone.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. I'm feeling really inspired to put all this into practice.
Me too.
And that wraps up our deep dive into Finish What You Start by Peter Hollins. I hope you found this exploration helpful. What are you going to implement from what we've learned today? Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the Book Summary Podcast for more in-depth explorations of amazing books. Thanks for joining us, and remember, you can finish what you start.